This tradition also talks about, as individuals, we can, if we wish, open halfway houses, clubhouses where AA meetings can be held, but as a group, we should never take on these endeavors or attach the AA name to them. Okay, the question that I ask myself is, how can I support this tradition? And there are more subtle ways that this tradition can be violated. I had an experience a couple of years ago where I was one more time the GSR of my home group and participating at the level of the district committee meeting. One of the groups came to the district and he was requesting that AA funds be used to, he was from a small town, and a neighboring small town had a telephone book in which he wanted to put a listing for our local intergroup number, which would have been fine, our AA intergroup number, but he also wanted to pay for the listing of a local treatment center. I sadly was the only one who voted against it. Tradition 7. Every AA group ought to be fully self-supporting, declining outside contributions. This tradition talks about that we are all extremists, or that we are all or nothing people, extremists, especially in our relationship to money. That we're willing to spend lavishly on 12-step cases, yet reluctant when it comes to putting a buck in the basket. And there is a great story in this tradition, if you've not read it, about Bill Wilson, where he was working at the GSO office, and the favorite slipper guy who was struggling to stay sober came in and gave him a hound dog look, and he remembered those days and gave this struggling member 1/6 of his week's pay, which was a large, he gave him $5, and his weekly pay at that point was $30. So it was a substantial amount of money, considering his wife was struggling to pay for the groceries. So he felt pretty good about giving him this money, and then he went to his local group that night, and the treasurer spoke up and, reminded them that they were struggling to meet their finances, and Bill was sitting next to another prospect that he was working on and feeling pretty puffed up about that, and as the basket was going around, he fished into his pocket and he felt a big coin, and then fished out a smaller coin and put that in the basket.
So ఇదేంటంటే అండి, సెల్ఫ్ సపోర్టింగ్ యొక్క ట్రెడిషన్ కదా. మనం ఇద్దరు రెండు రకాలుగా ఉంటాం, విపరీతాలు అనమాట. ఆల్కహాలిక్ అంటే ఒక వైపు బాగా పిసినారితనంగా ఉంటాం, అసలు రూపాయి పెట్టం దేనికి. ఇంకో వైపు ఏంటంటే
పెట్టం దేనికంటే ముఖ్యంగా కిట్టీలు
అండ్ లేకపోతే శుభ్రంగా ఎక్కువగా ఖర్చు పెట్టేస్తాం.
వేరే వాటి మీద ఖర్చు పెట్టమంటే బ్రహ్మాండం, చాలా దర్జాగా ఖర్చు పెడతాం.
అది సో ఇక్కడ బిల్లు గురించి ఒక స్టోరీ చెప్పింది. ఇది ఈ ట్రెడిషన్కి సంబంధించిన స్టోరీ. ఎప్పుడు వ్యక్తి రిలాప్స్ అవుతూ ఉండేవాడు. ఆ వ్యక్తి ఒక బుక్ ఇచ్చినప్పుడు బిల్ విల్సన్ ఆ రోజుల్లో $5 ఇచ్చేసాడు. వారానికి $30 సంపాదించాడు. అంటే $5 ఇచ్చాడు, మరి వారంలో 1/6 అంటే 1/6 వంతు ఇచ్చేసినట్టే. 6 వంతు ఇచ్చేసినట్టే. సో అప్పుడు మళ్ళీ దాని తర్వాత ఇచ్చేసి భలే ఇచ్చారా, బాగా ఇచ్చా ఇడికి అనుకుంటూ మనలాగే మీటింగ్కి వెళ్ళాడు. మీటింగ్కి వెళ్ళాక మీటింగ్లో ఎవరో న్యూ కమర్తో మాట్లాడుతూ కూర్చున్నాడు. ఈ ఆలోచన ఇంకా జరుగుతుంది, బాగా ఇచ్చాను అడిగి, పోన్లే మనం సాయం చేసాం అని. కిట్టి వచ్చినప్పుడు మటుకు పాకెట్లో చేయబెట్టాడు. పాకెట్లో చేయబెడితే పెద్ద కాయిన్ దొరికింది. పెద్ద కాయిన్ అంటే పెద్ద కరెన్సీ. అబ్బా ఈ పెద్ద కాయిన్ కాదు అని చిన్న కాయిన్ దగ్గరికి వెళ్ళి చిన్న కాయిన్ వేసాడు. అది సో పెట్టాల్సిన చోట పెద్ద మనసుతో పెట్టకపోవటం, పెట్టకూడని చోట పెద్ద మనసుతో పెట్టడం మన కన్ఫ్యూషన్.
ముఖ్యంగా అప్పుడు పాపం బిల్లు భార్య తిండి ఎక్కడి నుంచి తేవాలో, దానికి డబ్బులు ఎక్కడి నుంచి తేవాలో కూడా తెలియని ఒకటి. 2 గ్రూపు ఆర్థిక ఇబ్బందుల్లో ఉంది. అక్కడ డబ్బులు లేవు, ఇక్కడ డబ్బులు లేవు. అయినా ఈయన గారు ఏం చేశారు, అంటే అది కూడా ఒక విధంగా చెప్పాలంటే మరి ఆయన పెద్ద ఆయన అనొచ్చు అనకూడదు, కానీ అదొక రకమైన గ్రాండియోసిటీ.
As members, as individual AA members, we support the group financially to help provide meeting spaces and all the other services that are necessary for the group to provide an atmosphere for 12-step work to be done. And then the groups financially support the other service entities. We have a district, an area, an intergroup, and a GSO. So I ask myself, am I supporting my group financially and with my service? Am I giving back or am I still taking? It's interesting to watch members at my home group who, when a lot of us when we get here, some of us when we get here, don't have a lot of financial resources. Yet, they'll come to the meeting drinking a Starbucks and smoking cigarettes and have nothing to put in the basket. Tradition 8, Alcoholics Anonymous should remain forever non-professional, but our service centers may employ special workers. This is one of those situations that sometimes appear to be a contradiction in AA, but freely ye have received, freely give is the essence of this tradition, and where our 12-step work is concerned, it is never to be paid for. Sometimes we have situations where we bring in members of Alcoholics Anonymous to come put on a workshop for us, and they may be traveling a distance. And in the spirit of being self-supporting, the group will provide for their transportation or their necessities while they're here, but we never pay them to put on the presentation.
Good.
There's also the situation, for example, where the area that I live in, we have an intergroup office. And to expect someone to manage that office on a volunteer basis, one individual, would be too much to ask. So in a place where we would maybe have to hire a non-alcoholic, we've hired an AA member to serve as the office manager, and we pay her hopefully fair market value. So I ask myself, do I understand the difference in what is to be paid for, what services are to be paid for, what's not to be paid for? And in our case, the office manager is being paid to help make 12-step work possible. She's not being paid for 12-step work. And I've been given the word that we're going to wrap up at... Yes, we're going to take a break right now.
Right now?
Yep, yes.
You're done with the tradition?
We're done for now, and I think maybe we're going to pick it up after the break.
Sure, no
Okay.
issue. But again,
We need to come back.
1 hour?
1 hour. Okay.
2:30?
2:30.
Okay. Prayer.
లెట్స్ వేస్ ఫర్ ద ప్రేయర్. దయచేసి నుంచోండి. God, grant me the serenity to accept the things I cannot change, courage to change the things I can, and wisdom to know the difference.
Good morning, friends. I am an alcoholic. My name is Srinivas. So let us all raise for the serenity prayer. God, grant us the serenity to accept the things we cannot change, courage to change the things we can, and wisdom to know the difference.
Morning, friends. I'm an alcoholic. My name is Krishna. There's some high power, sponsor my family. I did not drink today. Welcome to second Rule 62. Okay. This will be a very special Rule 62. మనం చాలా రూల్ 62కి అదర్ చేసుకోబోతున్నాం, కానీ ఈ రూల్ 62 మాత్రం మీరు జీవితంలో సోబర్గా ఉన్నంతసార్లు గుర్తుంచుకుంటారు, లేకపోయినా కూడా గుర్తుంచుకుంటారు. అది మాత్రం ఎందుకంటే 6-7 సంవత్సరాల క్రితం ఈ పెద్ద మనిషి మన దగ్గరికి వచ్చాడు. అప్పటికి నాకు ఏదో స్పాన్సర్ ఉన్నాడు, నేను ఏదో గుడ్డు చెల్లపడ్డట్టు నేను చేసుకెళ్ళిపోతున్నాను. అసలు మనకి కార్యక్రమం అంటే ఏంటి, అట్లీస్ట్ నాకు ఆ కార్యక్రమం చేస్తే ఏమవుతుంది, మనం ఎలా ఉంటాం నేర్పింది పెద్ద మనిషి. అంచేత ఆయన మనతో పాటు ఉన్నాడు. ఆయనకంటే 2 రోజుల ముందు ఈవిడ జిమ్ వైఫ్ జేన్ ఈవిడ కార్యక్రమంలోకి వచ్చింది. ఆయన ఎలా చేస్తాడో అంతకంటే ఎక్కువగా తన స్పాన్సర్స్ తోటి కార్యక్రమం ప్రాక్టీస్ చేస్తుంది. వాళ్ళిద్దరు కూడా జోడీ అండ్ జూలీ తన స్పాన్సర్స్. వాళ్ళు 25 ఏళ్ళ వయసులో వచ్చేసారు ప్రోగ్రాంలోకి. కుర్రాళ్ళరే చూసుకోండి, ఇంకా తాగుదాం అనుకున్నాళ్ళ. అర్థమైందా? 25 ఏళ్ళ సోపరేటివ్ ఉంది వాడు. అర్థమైంది. తర్వాత భువనేశ్వరి నాగేశ్వరరావు గారు ఎక్కడ ఉన్నాడా? సీరియస్గా అర్థమైందా? ఓయ్ అవును, ఫౌండేషన్ గట్టిగా వేస్తాం. అంచేత దయచేసి మొబైల్స్ అన్నీ ఆఫ్ చేసి, మీకు మీ రికవరీ కంటే ఇంపార్టెంట్ ఏమైనా ఉందనుకుంటే ఆ పని చూసుకుని రండి, మేము వెయిట్ చేస్తాం. మాకేం బాగా దయచేసి ఇక్కడ మాత్రం 3 వ్యక్తులకు తప్పితే ఇంకా మొబైల్కి పర్మిషన్ లేదు. అయిపోయిందా? వాళ్ళ దగ్గర నుంచి ఆణిముత్యాలు వస్తాయి. మళ్ళీ జీవితంలో నేను మీకు సంగతి తెలియదు, 48 గంటలు వీళ్ళందరితో స్పెండ్ చేస్తానన్న సంగతి నాకైతే నమ్మకం లేదు. అంచేత దాన్ని పూర్తిగా వినియోగించుకోండి. రెండోది, ఇక్కడ చెప్పినవన్నీ ఇక్కడ చెప్పినవే అని పోయి మీ స్పాన్సర్లతో దెబ్బలాడకండి. అర్థమైందా? ఎప్పుడైనా గుర్తుంచుకోండి, స్పాన్సర్ ఈజ్ ఆల్వేస్ రైట్. అంచేత జిమ్ గారు చెప్పారు ఇది ఇలా కాదు, నువ్వు ఎందుకు ఇలా చెప్పావు అన్నాడు అనుకోండి, మళ్ళీ 1వ స్టెప్లోనూ మళ్ళీ -1లోనూ పడతారు. అది జాగ్రత్త. సో ఐ వాజ్ జస్ట్ టెల్లింగ్ దెమ్, డోంట్ క్రాస్ చెక్ విత్ యువర్ స్పాన్సర్స్ because you don't fight with them, because Jim told like this, why you are getting like that, because sponsor knows you better, so he's right. Unnecessary, you have the danger of going back in your steps. So yes. That's what it is. ఇంక మనం వేస్ట్ చేయడం, నేను వినడానికి కూర్చున్నాను ఇక్కడ. ఈ 5 నిమిషాలే నేను మాట్లాడేది, మిగతాది వాళ్ళే చెప్తారు. ఏమన్నా డౌట్స్ ఉంటే నోట్ చేసుకోండి. సమయం ఇచ్చినప్పుడు చెయ్యెత్తి అడిగినప్పుడు చేయండి. ఎంత స్మార్ట్గా వాడుకుంటారో ఈ సమయాన్ని, దాని మీద మీ అదర్ రికవరీలకి అంత బెనిఫిట్. బ్రేక్ఫాస్ట్ ఇంకా చేస్తున్నామండి, నాకు పొద్దునే బెడ్ కాఫీ రాలేదండి, నా రూమ్మేట్ గురక పెట్టాడండి, ఏమి నడవా. అర్థమైందా? రికవరీ కావాలా, ఇక్కడ ఉండండి. 9:30 కంటే 9:25కి ఇక్కడ ఉండండి, మొహమాటం లేదు. అలాగే బ్రేక్ టైమింగ్లు కూడా పలానా టైంకి వెనక్కి వస్తామని శ్రీనివాస్ చెప్తే ఆ టైంకి వస్తాం. అర్థమైందా? ఇప్పుడు ఫస్ట్ సెషన్ అసలు స్పాన్సరింగ్ ఎలా చేయాలి, స్పాన్సీ ఎలా ఉండాలి, ఈ విషయం చెప్పడానికి జిమ్ అండ్ జేన్ ఇద్దరు చెప్తారు. దే విల్ స్టార్ట్ ద ఫస్ట్ సెషన్ విత్ స్పాన్సర్షిప్ అండ్ స్పాన్సరింగ్. రైట్? ట్రాన్స్లేషన్ వాళ్ళు ఒకటే గుర్తుంచుకోండి, ఇంగ్లీష్ వచ్చి తెలుగు చేస్తే ట్రాన్స్లేషన్ పూర్తి ట్రాన్స్లేషన్ చేయట్లేదు. మన తెలుగు మిత్రులకి ఎంతవరకు వీలవుతుందో, ఎంత హృదయం పట్టుకుని ట్రాన్స్లేట్ చేసే ప్రయత్నం చేస్తున్నారు. అక్కడ ట్రాన్స్లేటర్లు తిక్కన అన్నయ్య పోతన కాదు, వాళ్ళకు వచ్చింది వాళ్ళు చేస్తున్నారు, ఎదవేష లేకుండా ఏంటంటే. అర్థమైందా? అది సంగతి. రైట్.
Good morning. My name is Jim Samuelson, and I'm an alcoholic. It is through the grace of God, sponsorship, and Alcoholics Anonymous. I've been sober since May 3rd, 1981, and for that I am truly grateful. I want to share my experience, strength, and hope when it comes to my journey and being sponsored and sponsoring other men. And I want you to remember is I don't speak for Alcoholics Anonymous. I have no official word on Alcoholics Anonymous. I have my experience, strength, and hope, and what I have learned where I thrive, and how I can best serve AA. When I first came to Alcoholics Anonymous, I did hear about sponsorship a lot in my first meetings. And what I was told was to get a sponsor who had something I wanted. Now, being brand new in AA, I was still very sick, so I looked for a sponsor who is very popular, and who a lot of women found attractive. And now he didn't work any AA steps, and he went to a lot of meetings, but he hadn't changed much. And what was happening for me is I hadn't started getting the solution of Alcoholics Anonymous in my life, and so I was getting sicker and sicker and sicker. And there came a time when, in sobriety, in early sobriety, I put a gun to my mouth and almost pulled the trigger. So I had to get a different sponsor, and I had to get a sponsor who actually had a solution in his life by working the steps. So my next sponsor, I looked for somebody who was happy in sobriety. And he became my next sponsor and started taking me through the steps. And he was sponsoring me the way he had been sponsored, which meant that when it came to the fifth step, he had me not do the fifth step with him, but with a local priest. So the priest had done many fifth steps, and he asked me what was the one thing I didn't want to share. But at that time, I had so much surrender, I was willing to share everything. So he had me go down the list, and after 30 minutes, he said, "Time's up," and he got up and walked out. And I walked home the 3 kilometers, feeling worse after the fifth step than when I started. I then went without a sponsor for 6 months and went to very few meetings of Alcoholics Anonymous. Though nothing really bad happened, I was not very happy. I worked many, many hours, and my life was still going nowhere. So I went back to my second sponsor and asked to go through the steps again. And on the second time, he had been sponsored differently. And the second time, he did the fifth step. I did the fifth step with him, and it was a very different experience. What happened in that fifth step with another alcoholic is that I found I was just like him. When I shared my fifth step, he shared little bits of pieces of his. And I found out this was the first time I knew that I was no different than anybody else at an AA meeting. And the second gift he gave me with that is after the fifth step, he treated me no different. And I knew that it was going to be okay. I then relocated to another part of the state and picked up a new local sponsor, but he was active at meetings and had not worked the steps or read the big book. And for the next 2 years, I spent a lot of time with him, but I was no longer growing. And I was not receiving the gifts of Alcoholics Anonymous. Because I was not growing, my alcoholism was slowly creeping up on me. So 2 years later, when I moved again and got another local sponsor, this one was not much in steps or traditions, and his sobriety was based on lots of service work. So only the third legacy. And because of I had not been working the steps or sponsoring other men, by the time I got this next sponsor, I was on the very fringe of Alcoholics Anonymous and was leaving AA again. So then for the next 2 years, I lost almost everything I had gained in Alcoholics Anonymous. I had lost the prestigious job. I lost the fancy sports car. I got married. I was getting a divorce. I bought a home. I was losing the home to the bank. Once again, suicide seemed like a very peaceful solution for me. So I came and I found another sponsor, but this was a sponsor who actively participated in the steps with me, who walked the journey with me, who asked me to stay in very close contact with him on a regular basis, and to do everything that he was doing, and that he would never ask me to do anything that he was not already doing himself. He sponsored me through the 12 steps, the 12 traditions, and the 12 concepts, so that I had a good understanding and a good practical understanding of all 3 legacies of Alcoholics Anonymous and how to apply them in my life. So by the time I was 8 years sober, I had been through many sponsors, each sponsored in a very different way, and all were fine. But where I found that I thrived best is, one, that I had a sponsor who had worked the steps and was actively being sponsored. 2, that I had a sponsor and that I took the steps with him, including the 5th step, so that I could learn and feel and be a part of Alcoholics Anonymous. And 3, that I do the daily walk with my sponsor, and that is how I found, through the 12 steps, 12 traditions, and 12 concepts, and it was that kind of sponsorship where I really grew and thrived. I then got involved in learning the history of AA, and I studied Alcoholics Anonymous. And I found out that throughout the Big Book, there is a constant reference of the importance of working with alcoholics. Throughout the very beginning of the Big Book, it's not, though we call it 12-step work, it is throughout every step. You know, where if we fall short of our chosen ideal, intensive work with other alcoholics. When all else fails, intensive work with other alcoholics. That was the foundation throughout the Big Book. And then I learned the history of alcoholics and the importance of working with another alcoholic. Early AA, they didn't call it sponsorship, but what they found out when Bill Wilson had his spiritual experience and got sober, while attending the Oxford groups and constantly working to help other alcoholics, for the first 6 months, though he worked with hundreds of alcoholics, not a single one stayed sober. And he was getting frustrated, and his wife Lois told him, "But Bill, by you trying to work with other alcoholics, you're staying sober for the first time in your life." So Bill Wilson took his spiritual experience, the understanding he learned from Dr. Silkworth about the allergy and the obsession. And when Bill was traveling and was struck with the cravings, he knew he had to work with another alcoholic, and through a series of calls ran across Dr. Bob. And him and Dr. Bob connected immediately and spent the next several months talking about spiritual things. And what happened is Dr. Bob got drunk. So what they learned as a result of that, when they sobered up Dr. Bob again, that just talking about spiritual things is important, but not enough for us alcoholics. And that it is the magic action is working with another alcoholic to really make it work for us. And during that, shortly thereafter, AA started growing quickly as they were constantly trying to sober up new alcoholics. So by the time they started writing the Big Book, Bill Wilson was only a few years sober, and they shared exactly what they had been learning. And obviously, as you read the Big Book in the first 164 pages, the constant reference about working with other alcoholics in Dr. Bob's story and Bill Wilson's story is a great reminder of that, which has to be a foundation of our sobriety for us to continue to grow. What they learned after the Big Book is that I must continually work with other alcoholics, and that, you know, rather than just introducing them to AA, if I work with them to go through the steps, that we can continue to grow and thrive. So, armed with my experience, knowledge of the big book, and the facts of the AA history, I proceeded to try to sponsor as many guys as I could. And all of the guys I started with all got drunk. And so I thought I was doing something wrong, and I asked my sponsor what I'm doing wrong, and he says, "Your sponsorship is perfect. You're staying sober." Many of the guys that I sponsored ignored my direction, and I thought I was doing something wrong. And my sponsor told me that I can't break broken.
ఆయన ఎప్పుడైతే స్పాన్సర్షిప్గా డైరెక్షన్ ఇవ్వటం మొదలుపెట్టాడో వాళ్ళు చాలామంది వినేవాళ్ళు కాదంట. ఈయన పోయి ఆయన స్పాన్సర్తో చెప్పుకునేవాడు అంటారు. ఆయన చెప్పాడంట, అది సహజమే, మామూలే, వాళ్ళు వినరు అని ఆయన చెప్పాడు.
I did many things wrong with these guys, but I always was trying to do my best. I remember one guy, he was spending a lot of time at the bars because he was dating a prostitute and stripper. And I knew it wasn't good for his sobriety, so I gave an ultimatum. Either he breaks it off with his girlfriend or he lets me go as a sponsor. And he got up and walked out of the meeting and let me go as a sponsor and got drunk. You know, but each person I sponsored, I learned about, you know, in the big book it says we must help others, but we need to learn, but through our practice, we learn when and how to help others. And this is my journey of learning how to be a sponsor. I made many mistakes. My ego got involved. I thought the men I sponsored were a reflection on me, and if they looked bad, I looked bad because it became all about me. And you know, every mistake I made taught me more and more and helped me grow in humility and in service to other alcoholics. I became very active in all legacies of Alcoholics Anonymous. And as a result of my actions and in my support of the AA traditions, Jane and I became ostracized by the general AA community, where the people we sponsored, AA members would approach them and tell them they would get drunk if they kept us as sponsors. And we lost many people that we sponsored because of that. What we did is we got more active in working in 12-stepping wet drunks. There is no shortage of wet drunks in our area, so we just outnumbered them. We just worked with that many more alcoholics because we had to stay sober, and we were able to continue to find and work with alcoholics. Through my own actions, in my sobriety, I had realized that of myself and by myself, I cannot stay sober. And so I surrendered completely and totally to sponsorship and the direction of a sponsor, knowing full well that their direction could not be any worse than mine, whether I was drunk or sober.
ఆయన ఎప్పుడైతే ఇతర తాగుబోతులతో కలిసి పనిచేయటం మొదలుపెట్టాడో వాళ్ళకి ఆయనకి పెద్దగా తేడా ఏమీ లేదు. నా డైరెక్షన్ అయినా వాళ్ళ డైరెక్షన్ అయినా ఒకే విధంగా ఉంటుంది. వెదర్ వాళ్ళు తాగి ఉన్నా కానీ నేను సోబర్గా ఉన్నా కానీ మా ఆలోచనలు ఒకే విధంగా ఉంటాయి అనే విషయం ఆయనకు అర్థమైంది.
So it was during this time when I reached out to a newcomer at a meeting of Alcoholics Anonymous, he actually reached out to me and he wanted to talk to me about sponsorship. And I was approached by the leader of that meeting and told that it was not my place to talk to other newcomers at his AA group. I talked to my sponsor about it, and my sponsor told me to tell him to fuck off. So the next time I saw him, I told him to fuck off. And when I reported back to my sponsor how proud I was that I told him that, my sponsor had to start teaching me about the spirit of the direction. So he was my sponsor for over 15, maybe 18 years. And what happened is he started growing in a direction that I did not want to grow into. My sponsor became the leader of an AA group. He ignored the traditions more and more. And I felt more and more conflict with the actions he was taking and the actions that I wanted to take and the way I wanted to grow in Alcoholics Anonymous. So here was the man that had saved my life and taught me true Alcoholics Anonymous where I could grow and thrive, who worked me through the steps, the traditions, the concepts, who helped me learn how to be of service in Alcoholics Anonymous, who helped teach me how to sponsor other men, how to learn when and how to give, and how to have my place in AA. And for several years, I struggled with him as my sponsor. I then was directed to another man in my area who was also had many years of sobriety, was a great servant to Alcoholics Anonymous, had tremendous humility, laughter, and just quietly took the actions necessary to stay sober. At many meetings, he sponsored more people than anybody else in the group. He had more sobriety than anybody else in the group, and you never knew just because he was always constantly one among many. That man is now my sponsor today and has been my sponsor for about 9 years now. And in looking back, every sponsor from the very first one to the one I have today all served a purpose in my life. They all gave me lessons, they all taught me, and they were the perfect sponsor at the moment. And there is nothing wrong with the fact that I need to grow sometimes in a direction that my current sponsor can't take me. That's not his fault. That's not his problem. That's not his failing. Each sponsor prepared me for the next one. There was a time when I was 25 years sober, and I was going through a very, very hard time with my health, with Jane's health, with my job, and our finances. And I didn't know if we would ever get out of the bad health problems. And I finally realized that this might help me become who God would have me be. And if that's the case, then I got on my knees and I asked God to do whatever it takes for me to be who He wants me to be. And it is like that way with my sponsors. For me to be who God wants me to be, each sponsor took me part of the journey, and then handed me off to my new sponsor, who then took me to the next part of my journey. I have made my sponsor many things in my life. I have made my sponsor the voice of my higher power. I have made my sponsor my teacher. I have made my sponsor my anger. I have made my sponsor my resentments. But I think it was this morning, I can't remember who told me, and I loved the way he said it, is my sponsor is a student with me. My sponsor is that outside voice. His life is unaffected by my life. He provides me the clarity to help me see me as who I am and my life as it is, and helps me understand what actions and principles of Alcoholics Anonymous I can take and use to do the next right thing. I used to ask my sponsor to prove why he is right. Now I ask myself, how can I help me see where my sponsor might be right, and to take the action so that I can have the experience and then the understanding. Because I don't know where I've never been. I can't see what I've never seen. I can't feel what I've never experienced. Of the men I sponsor, I used to get my feelings hurt if they fired me as their sponsor and got somebody else, until I started learning and growing in the traditions. The 12th tradition reminds me that my service in AA should not be without recognition, and that I needed to live on principles over personalities, and that gave me the answer. And if somebody found a better sponsor, that is a wonderful thing. I believe in the principle of sponsor. Who the sponsor is the personality. So if anybody, I encourage people to have one. They don't have to have me, but they have to have a sponsor. For a while, I tried to sponsor like some of my AA heroes, thinking that, if I sponsored like them, I would be more helpful. And what happened is I became miserable, and the men I sponsored became miserable. And even the one I tried to emulate, he told me, Jim, you serve AA best by being the best AA member you can be. You actually diminish your service to AA if you try to be like me. And he was the one that encouraged me to be the best Jim and to sponsor the guys. It's the same principles, it's the same spirit, it's the same actions, but it is through the eyes, the same experience and voice of Jim, and not him. One of the keys in sponsorship for me, to being sponsored and to sponsor other men, is that I must always remain teachable. And therefore I'm constantly learning, constantly changing a little bit here and there. And what I have found is I actually sponsor men differently in the way that's most effective for them. Some men I am very strict and very strong. Some men I'm very soft and very quiet. For me to whisper for them is like a shout, because they need very little. Others I have to shout to have them be a whisper. And so as my sponsor does for me, I do for the men I sponsor, is I share my failings, my mistakes, and they take comfort that their sponsor has been through the same problems that they have. In fact, I sometimes have to make amends to the men I sponsor. I don't always handle things right, and I have to go back and be that example of an AA member that when we make mistakes, this is what we do. And sometimes I have to take that to them, because I should never my relationship with any person in AA should be no different, in that when I do harm, I have to make amends. Probably the hardest thing I have to do is to share complete honesty of where I'm at and where I'm going, how I'm using AA, and how I'm using my sponsor to take care of the mistakes I make. The longer I'm sober, the more that ego wants to come in and says, well, Jim, you have to be the example of all that is good. And the reality is, I have to be that example of all that is honest. I was just asking if Jane, Jody, or Julie, if there was anything they wanted to share when it came to sponsorship, because I know Jane has sponsored women since her very first year of sobriety. Jody has sponsored, women throughout her sobriety, and Julie has sponsored many, many women throughout her sobriety. They've all been sponsored, and so they have tremendous experience. And they all said no. They're all too they're too busy thinking about what they got to talk about. What I want to make sure, is heard is this is only, my experience, and my experience is no more important than your experience. And I want to make sure that, and as we are all for sharing here, we're only just 4 members of this group. And your experience is as valuable and as important as ours. And your experience can uniquely help another alcoholic. There was a time when I was 15 years sober, and I had a guy that I sponsored that was 18 months sober. And we went together to do a 12-step call and meet with a wet alcoholic who was still drinking. And as we came to his door, and he said, and he looked at me and he goes, "How long have you been sober?" And I proudly puffed up, "I've been sober 15 years, with, and in my mind with lots of experience, and I can help you." And then the alcoholic looked at the guy I sponsored, and he said, "How long have you been sober?" And he put his head down. "I haven't been sober very long, I had about 18 months. So the alcoholic looked at me and he says, "I don't want to talk to you." And he looked at the man I sponsored, Mickey, and he says, "Come into my room and let us talk, because I can understand you." With that, that's all I've got to share. Is the format then question and answer, or what goes next?
Another,
Let's do questions. Let's do questions.
Hi, I'm Karthik. I'm an alcoholic.
Hi, Karthik.
I had like a couple of questions, not just one. I'm as we spoke yesterday, I have only months of sobriety. I've been in AA for a year and a half, but I did relapse in between. My problem is, should I be going out to offer help, or should the member come to me for help?
That is an excellent question. For years in AA, some groups says those who are willing to sponsor, raise your hand, and I always raised my hand. In other groups in AA, when a newcomer comes, they pass around a piece of paper, and those willing to sponsor will sign their paper and phone number and hand that to the newcomer. And I never got a single call. Never, for years this went on. And my sponsor told me that nobody calls anybody they don't know. And so what I should do is, rather than give my phone numbers, is to get theirs and to call them the next day and see how they're going. Invite them to a meeting I'm going to, and welcome them to the meeting and spend time with them and sit with them. Try to meet with them maybe for coffee in between meetings. And what I found is, when I did that and I reached out to them just to be a friend in AA, they oftentimes asked me to be their sponsor because they came to know me. Excellent question.
సో ఆయన ఏమంటున్నారంటే అండి,
Oh, he's got to translate that.
అది కూడా ఉంటుందా? ఆయన ఏమంటున్నారంటే, ముందు వీళ్ళకి గ్రూపుల్లో అక్కడ అమెరికాలో ఎలా ఉండేదంటే, ఒక లిస్ట్ ఉండేదన్నమాట. దాంట్లో మనం పేరు రాయొచ్చు, మేము స్పాన్సర్ చేస్తామని, ఫోన్ నెంబర్ రాయొచ్చు. అలా ఎన్నో చోట్ల లిస్టులో ఫోన్ నెంబర్ ఇచ్చారు, పేరు ఇచ్చారు, అదే ఆవిడ కాల్ చేయలేదు. సో ఈయన వెళ్ళి ఈయన స్పాన్సర్ని అడిగారు, ఏంటి ఎవరు ఫోన్ చేయట్లేదంటే, నీ గురించి వాళ్ళకి తెలియకపోతే ఎలా ఫోన్ చేస్తారు, నువ్వు ఫోన్ నెంబర్ ఇచ్చినంత మాత్రాన్న. సో నువ్వు వాళ్ళతో మాట్లాడు, వాడి ఫోన్ నెంబర్ నువ్వు తీసుకో, మర్నాడు ఫోన్ చేయి, ఎలా ఉన్నావు బాబు అని అడుగు, మాట్లాడు, ఎప్పుడైనా కాఫీకి తీసుకెళ్ళు, కాఫీ దగ్గర కూర్చొని మాట్లాడు. అలాగా నీ గురించి ఆడికి తెలియటం మొదలుపెట్టాక వాళ్ళే నేను స్పాన్సర్గా అడుగుతారు. సో నీ గురించి నువ్వు అతనితో టైం స్పెండ్ చేస్తే అలవాటు. So my second question was, in my initial recovery, even today, sometimes I looked, initially it was way more than what it is right now. So initially I was looking at the character defects of my sponsor, like the person. So the point you shared here, that while changing sponsors was mainly because you didn't like them following they were not following the traditions, or you didn't like the way they were living the life, their own lives. So there comes my dilemma, because whenever initially I used to think like this, it used to cause me frustration. So what I started thinking was principles before personality, which worked excellently for me. Whenever I say that, my mind clears out and I just shut up and listen. But so when I heard your sharing, again the dilemma started within me. So, isn't it just enough to, keeping my sponsor as voice of God, as you mentioned, and just, not look at his personality traits because nobody is perfect,
Right.
and just go ahead with the same sponsor? Or will it be, for everyone, will there be a time when you have to change your sponsor?
No, that's a very good question. And when I said the voice of God, I meant that my view of my sponsor was that he had to be perfect. And in fact, I thought he was perfect and that he did nothing wrong. And then I would be greatly disappointed when he did. And so, in my view, is, sponsors are no more of an AA member and no less of an AA member than I am, right? And so for me, the idea of a student AA member is somebody who's still learning. And as a teacher, they're no longer learning and they're instructing others. So I like the phrase that was used is my sponsor is just another student at Alcoholics Anonymous with me. So the way you use the voice of God and says, is fine. Because I had the additional thing, he must also be perfect. And that caused me great discomfort. What my sponsor today had one sponsor for 46 years. The man who 12-stepped him became his sponsor until his sponsor died about 6 months ago. That is very unusual, actually, that goes on that long. Most times, for many good reasons, there's a new teacher for me to work with, new senior students for me to work with. And the best way that I know is that it's not a quick decision to ever change sponsors. And oftentimes it's best done by bringing up and talking with my sponsor or my sponsor's sponsor. And say, here's the situation. What do you think I should do? And get that outside perspective, because I don't always understand my perspective. But my sponsor's sponsor oftentimes does. And I have, and I've never switched sponsor the last 3 without talking to my sponsor's sponsor and getting their guidance and deferring to their direction.
బాబు అందరూ రికవర్ అయిపోయారా? ఎవరికి ఏం క్వశ్చన్స్ లేవా? మీ స్పాన్సర్లు అందరూ చాలా మంచోళ్ళా? మీకేం తలకాయ నొప్పులు లేవా? ముందు ఒకసారి చెప్పండి. స్పాన్సర్ గారు వెనకాల 100 డౌట్లు వస్తుంటే మరి ఇప్పుడు ఎందుకు రావు? మీ డౌట్ మీ ఒక్కరిదే కాదు, పక్కవాడికి కూడా ఉంటుంది, గుర్తుంచుకోండి. అడగండి క్వశ్చన్స్.
I think you can all hear me.
No.
Hi Jim. I'm an alcoholic. My name is Gautam. I came to AA in 96. I haven't been sober that long. I've had stints of 3 years, 4 years. It's only recently that I got a sponsor. Regarding step work, see, when people talk about, the wreckage of the past, and most of what happened has kind of been resolved in the head. At the head, heart level or whatever. I don't hold many resentments. The resentments that I do hold are of very recent origin. The things that happened like way back in the past, I've also gotten to a point where I've forgiven myself. First, the fear was, why do you want to dredge up the past again? It's over and done with. I sleep well. I wake up with no regrets or fear or whatever. I seem to be functional, at least to my ears. That's my opinion. My family has a different idea about that. But so, if I were to do the step work now, where would I start? Because I don't want to be getting into issues 20 years ago, what happened. You know, mostly my resentments were with my dad putting me in a treatment facility and stuff like that. That kind of, I mean, resolved in the sense I don't hold anything, you know, that. So I'm not saying that I've kind of evolved to an extent where things like that don't bother me at all, because even the little things in life nowadays, there are just things that happen around me that I don't like, right? But then the program helps me when I look at it and I say, you know, you just got to accept things, you know, life is going to be like that, stuff like that. So what would you suggest for a person like me to, if I start this step? See, there is also, the fear actually is minimal. It's not too much. The laziness is. My friend Pratul had shared recently. Fourth step is, man, all that writing, do I really need this? You know, the step 1 to 3 is fine with me. Do I really need this now? You know, I'd love for it to be one of those, you know, pick the following kind of. Because it's more, I think it's more to do with me just being lazy. I have a lot of time on my hands. It's not that I'm too busy or whatever, but I'm saying, oh, who needs this now? You know, kind of.
Good morning, friends. I'm an alcoholic. My name is Dinakar. Hi, Jim. Hi, Jody. Hi, madam. How are you? Good morning. I'm sorry I have been late. Okay. I have heard what you have been sharing. In fact, I have one of the best rappers with my sponsor from his day one. Okay. And twice I have done my step work. Now I'm in the 14th year of my sobriety. I have done that step work twice. And for the third time, by seeing my sponsor, and I have got the utmost respect and love towards him. But what has happened was, once I came up to the 7th step, okay, he said that you go back to the 3rd step and do it again. What? Honestly, I don't, what I did in my 4th step or 5th step or 6th step, there are no added resentments, there are no added fears, or there are no this thing. The other thing is, even now as I am speaking, I do not have any kind of humility. Honestly, I am trying to build on that. Let me be honest with that. But I have got some very, indispensable family responsibilities, and my life revolves around my family, my office work, and my AA. Only these 3. Okay. Apart from this, even to attend here also, even now, why I came late was, my elder son was suffering from asthma. He had to be given the nebulization. So these things crop up when I am going outside, or when I am going outside India or something like that. So these have become, I am very attached to my family. And that much attachment I have towards my sponsor also. Because I have been seeing him from the day one, that's why I chose him as my sponsor. And I have, even before we had that relationship as a sponsor or a sponsee, I had been confiding with him. I had been confiding with him with everything. Okay, now once this fiduciary capacity has come, and I am always, surrounded by very, very dominant personalities. My father is a very dominant personality, and my mother is, both my mothers are dominant personalities. My wife is silently dominant, and I am a very dominant personality. She is very...
Jake, do you remember something?
Okay. So, why do I need to go back to step 3 when I am saying with brutal honesty that let me go through that experience of, it's not a question of humiliation. I have come so far by God's grace, fellowship, and I have been guided properly. And now my sobriety is my life today. I'm happy, I'm laughing, I'm sharing with everybody because I'm happy. And many things have happened in between. Like what? Somebody is promoting that sponsor, somebody is going out of the way to do that. I do not do that. I say that you have got a problem, go to him. He will solve. I don't even give his number unless this fellow wants to. So if I am being that brutally honest, why is there no reciprocation?
I was told once, and I love this, by my sponsor, he said, all steps help me with the third step, right? Everything goes back to the third step and relates to the third step, which means that each one teaches me to help let go, help to practice, turn my will and my life over to the care of God. So turn my will is understanding the next right thing or the action that God would have me be, and letting go of the results, and that the results are as God would have them be. All the steps help me practice the third step better, and the third step helps me practice each of the other steps better. So it is very good to go back to the third, and I constantly go to the third myself, because it is where it's my touchstone to reground myself so that I can best handle the next situation.
So he has a question for you. So he has been in the program for a while, and due to some of the fellow members' campaign from the past couple of years, he's been hearing that do your step work, which would help you. So